Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today we're going to talk about getting them to switch. How do we get a customer to switch over to your product or your service when they're already using something else or somebody else? In other words, how do we reduce that perceived effort to switch over? In order to do that, let me tell you a story first to kind of set this up, frame this conversation. About a year or two ago, I had a plumbing issue, and I had this faucet that was constantly leaking. It was bad, but not bad enough. Month goes by, it's still bad. 2 months go by, okay, this thing has gotten to the point where I really need to deal with this thing. Now, I go to the plumbing store, get what I need, I come back, and within 10 minutes, listen carefully, 10 minutes, I solve the problem. And then I'm slapping myself on the forehead going, why didn't I do this earlier? Why did I fix this 2 months ago? Well, the reason I didn't fix it 2 months ago is because of the story I had told myself. See, the story I told myself in my head went something like this. Messing with plumbing issues is never an easy task. It's going to be difficult, and every time I've tried this in the past, it's always been a bad experience. And in my head, I'm also amplifying how bad that experience really was. So in other words, the story I told myself had three components. One, it was hard and it was difficult. Two, my past experience has never been good. Three, I've amplified how bad it really was. And what I told myself was, I don't want to deal with this because of all these issues. Now think about this for a second. Your customer, you're challenging them to switch over to your product or service. And much like the plumbing issue, all they can feel in their head, the story that they're telling themselves, is how difficult that's going to be. Now, to understand this, let's look at the customer brain. There's three parts of the customer brain. There's the logical part, right? The prefrontal cortex, the emotional impact part of the brain. And then at the base of your spine, right there at the base of your brain, there is the what? The most primal side of you, the reptilian brain, and this little nugget called the amygdala. That's the fear center. That's the fear center that's triggered when customers are asked to switch over. In other words, they're afraid. You know, the amygdala is all about safety. Risk aversion, doesn't want to mess with the status quo, doesn't want to change. So right now, when you're asking your customer to make a switch, to make a change to your product over what they're currently using or doing, all they can feel is that brain pain. The amygdala is like an alarm sounding, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And the customer, much like me in my plumbing story, is telling himself the same story. He says, well, you know, last time I tried to switch over, it wasn't that easy. In fact, it was a bad experience, and it was more difficult than I thought it would be. So the customer is telling himself that story, how difficult it will be. Now think about a personal example you might have. Have you ever tried switching cable companies? Haha, don't laugh. I know you know what I'm talking about. Switching over from one cable company to another, it's like it takes an act of Congress just to get it right. I know, that's a bad analogy, but I did my best on that one. But you get the idea that switching over is never easy because of the story we tell ourselves, right? I don't want to wait for the cable guy. I got to call them up. Then I got to cancel my other service. And then I got to reschedule if I missed them. And on and on and on. Even if they install it, it may not be right. So you tell yourself these stories in your head, and all of a sudden, you don't want to switch over. So what can we do? What can we do to help the customer switch over? Well, here's a simple blueprint. It's a simple 3-step safety blueprint. Again, the goal here is to calm down that part of the brain, the amygdala, the risk center of our customers. We need to reduce their perceived effort of how much effort it's going to take to switch over. The more comfortable we can make them feel, the better we can make them feel, the safer we can make them feel about switching over, the more likely they are to make the change. So here's a 3-step process. Step number 1, when you're talking to your customer, acknowledge the fact that change is hard. Okay, acknowledge that you also are concerned. This is being very empathetic. Okay, you're being very empathetic with the customer. You're letting them know, look, I understand your fear. I understand your trepidations. I understand your concerns. And then shift to step 2. Step 2 is where you're going to lay out the plan. You're going to educate the customer here on what you're going to do. What you're going to do is the first thing you're going to say, here's what we're going to do. Then here's how we're going to do it. and then give them the time frame. This will be done by this time frame. So again, step number 1 is acknowledge that change is difficult and you understand the concern. Step number 2, show them that you have a plan. Talk about the what, how, and by when. What you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and by when it's going to be done. Now, what you're doing in this step is really calming down the customer's risk aversion factor. In other words, by seeing a plan, the customer is thinking, okay, that's how they're going to do it. That's what they're going to do. That's how they're going to do it. And okay, so it'll be done by this time frame, and you reassure them. And that is step number 3. Reassure them with a guarantee. Find a way to reassure them with a guarantee that you'll give their money back or that you'll have somebody on site within 24 hours, whatever the case may be. Find a way to reassure them that you're going to be there to make sure this is executed correctly. So again, the 3-step blueprint for getting people to switch over is acknowledge that change is difficult. You're concerned and you know that they are also. Step 2, show them the what, the how, the when. What will be done? How will it be done? And by when? That time frame is so important. I can't emphasize that. There's something about giving people a timeline that makes the brain calm down. That part of the brain, the risk center, calm down. So again, the time frame is very key. Then last but not least is reassure them with the guarantee. Something that will say, I will make sure that I'm here on site. This will be done by when, and then also talk about what you're going to do to make sure that it's running correctly, at least to meet, if not exceed, their expectations. If you can do this, you'll deactivate that part of the brain that says, no, don't do it, don't do it. And again, it's not that people don't want to change. People want to make the change. And this is what you always have to keep in mind when you're talking to your customers. Customers, if you can show them the value of what you have to offer, they want to change. But the first thing to do is create that value. This is what you're always taught. But what we often don't think about is the perceived effort. In their brain, they're magnifying how difficult this is going to be. So again, your job is to calm that amygdala down, that part of the brain that says don't do it. And you do that with a simple 3-step safety blueprint. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how and you know how to talk to the customer brain. Take care.
Every manager can feel it. The difference between a motivated, value-driven sales team and one that's stuck in a rut. CEOs know the difference too. They can see it clearly in the profit and loss columns. The question is, how do you get your team to this elite level? Is there something extra you can do to break through the remaining resistance and equip them with the right mindset to grow your business? Yes, there is. But you're not going to do it with one of those cheesy inspirational speakers or some self-proclaimed guru. What you need is someone with a real business track record to deliver key insights in a captivating way, to give your team the right tools for selling in today's tough marketplace. Enter Victor Antonio, experienced executive, innovative thinker, compelling speaker. He's ready to deliver the message you need your people to hear, not with a canned speech, but a customized, dynamic keynote designed to deliver results. Bring Victor Antonio to your next event before the competition does. Go to www.victorantonio.com for more information.